The brothers Wisp. The brothers Wisp, brothers Wisp. The brothers Wisp. The brothers.
You're now listening to Greg. It's the brothers.
Hey everybody, this is Greg with the Brothers Wisp number 137, coming from the motherland, Texas, where it is still raining. I complained about it raining last time. It is still raining. This is unprecedented for us. So hopefully it dries up. Actually, it's going to make the float down the river in a couple of weeks pretty solid. So that's I don't know if that's a very Texas thing or kind of just a dumb redneck thing, but we grab a cooler, fill it up with stuff, put it in an inner tube, put ourselves in inner tubes, and go down a freezing river. So it's like you kind of hover out of the inner tube a little bit so you can get warm, and then you get too warm, you just kind of dip your butt down in the water. So it's like this cycle. It's pretty fun. But with us making interesting faces at my commentary is Tommy Krogan, all the way from Colorado.
Yep, northeastern Colorado. Hailing from, actually, we had almost our wettest May in recorded history. So wasn't quite, didn't quite break the record as far as I understand it. But I understand what you mean by it's still raining. Lots and lots and lots of rain. It was nice.
Yeah, it's wet.
Finally, we've been dry for too many years.
I don't know, man. When it rains like this, we just get a lot of mosquitoes, so I'm not usually a big fan of it. It's macaroni in the pot wet down here. All right, so let's do the patron / sponsor bits. So this go around, we have a new patron. So if you go to patreon.com /thebrotherswisp, you throw us a couple of bones, you get access to the patron only Slack, and you're supporting the podcast. And this go around, we have, and you get to take a swing at it, Tommy. I'm going to say Bill Buchan. Is that how you'd say that?
Buchan or Butchin? No, Buchan. Let's go with Buchan.
And so I believe Bill is a Scotsman. I think our second Scotsman. So very international.
Yeah, he might have a really good pronunciation of that name. Yeah. At the very least, he has an excellent accent.
Yeah, it's going to be very enthusiastic, his pronunciation, I'm sure of that. So, Bill, our apologies for butchering that. Anyway, let's move on to some of the sponsors. I will do tower coverage. So I know towercoverage.com actually has an update. They did 1 meter LiDAR information release, and I think they said that covers most of North America and Europe, I want to say. So that's good stuff. I'm going to go ahead and read their copy here. It is, tower coverage is your RF propagation system to empower your network, real-time data metrics, enable your coverage area, reaching your customer base, and more. The industry's best RF propagation mapping system allows website integration for customer sign-up and pre-qualification. Use this data to scientifically plan network expansion and help your WISP succeed. Get a free trial today at towercoverage.com. I was bleeding over from the line above. My bad. All right.
Yeah, I'll take QuickBait. They have indoor and outdoor 60 gigahertz kit that is just set it and forget it simple. Crazy feature set for the price with an API, deployment tools, solid distance, and it can do up to 8 clients per hub. And the sale site is up and seems to be working. And here soon, I'm hoping to have a little bit of equipment from them to see how that is all working out and see if I can play around with it and have some fun.
Roll. I'd love to see somebody stack their stuff up against everybody else, and that is kwikbit.com. We also have our longest, most loyal sponsor here, and it is Sonar.software. They are a scalable, intuitive, and comprehensive ISP and operational support system. To learn more about those guys, you just pop right over in your little fancy browser to Sonar.software. All right. So the list isn't terribly long today, much like me not long for this world. So let's get into it. We had some front matter, which was, oh man, somebody sent me a pretty long descriptive email in response to the one we did. I think it was actually like a couple of episodes ago about client isolation, DHCP snooping. We were talking about that. And he was saying on his networks now, he's using a new feature in the Mikrotik's called Local Proxy Arp. So if you go into an interface and you go to the ARP section in the dropdown, there's an option now for Local Proxy Arp. And what that does is it makes the Mikrotik on that interface respond to all ARP queries. So it basically says any MAC address that comes in, it says, yeah, that's me. That's me. So that everything will technically get funneled through him. So that still gives you the ability to do firewalling and things like that. So if you had client isolation on, right, say on a switch, the isolated ports aren't going to be able to communicate with each other, even though they're on the same, layer 2 network, they're on the same subnet, they're not going to be able to communicate. But if you turn on Local Proxy Arp, the Mikrotik acting as a router on a trusted port will say, oh yeah, I'm client 2's, I'm client 2, and it will just proxy all the traffic through him. So that could theoretically accomplish allowing some of your clients to communicate, but you have to also keep in mind that that means now all that traffic's looping through the router. So if you're doing like server stuff, you absolutely wouldn't want to do this, right? This would be on like a client network where you're trying to protect hosts from each other. I'm trying to think of a scenario where you'd want them to actually talk to each other at all. I know in my MDUs, yeah, I'm doing like in the room, I want everybody, all the clients inside that one room to communicate in case they stick like a Chromecast in there, right? Or they have like an Apple TV. I want, the clients to be able to actually control the stuff in that room. So I don't turn any client isolation off on there, but as they come into the network, as they hit their switch, I isolate everybody so none of the rooms can communicate with each other. So that works well for me. Can you imagine a scenario where you'd want to enable, maybe like a guest network somewhere? Does that make sense? Would you want guests on a guest network to
where
be able
you
to talk to each other though?
I think a lot of time, I think it depends on the situation. Because like, if you have like some sort of guest network where they want to be able to like, I've seen bars where you could connect up to the Wi-Fi and you could they had an app and you could pay money to play music, and it was through the Wi-Fi and through a little system like that. I was like, well, I'm not installing some random app, so I didn't play around with it much, but that might be a requirement. Other than that, though, yeah, you in that situation, yeah, you definitely not want to mess around with stuff, or at least test to make certain that certain devices would be able to work. And it really just depends on what services you're providing on the network. If you just want to give people internet access, yeah, no, you don't get to talk to anybody else. And it is almost along the same lines of being able to have a wireless SSID per client, which would be kind of nice, because you really don't want them talking amongst each other doing stuff, because then like at a coffee shop, you definitely don't want them interacting with each other, because that's how they did. That's how the Facebook cookie hack that people were able to do at like Starbucks and stuff. They were able to hijack Facebook login cookies from people that were also logged into the same network.
I remember that. It was called Firesheet. You could load it in Firefox. Not that I've ever done that. But it was amazingly effective, theoretically.
Well, at the very least, it terrified the entire industry enough to enable HTTPS for the entirety of their websites, which the security world had been complaining about for years. There's this. These cookies are not secure, and these are what identify you. And people have been complaining about it for years, and it wasn't until Firesheet that did it in such a way that it was easy to implement and easy to abuse that it caught industry attention and made people. And then Google turned HTTPS on everything, and it was always the argument was, oh, security will slow down your servers and blah, blah, blah. And they were like, oh no, we only see like I can't recall. It was only like 5 to 10%. It wasn't even 10%. It was less than 10% slowdown with the proper hardware offloading built into the server. So it was pretty it was really good. And nowadays we complain about Google punishing you for not having
Right.
HTTPS for the entirety of your website. And the negatives that do come around, like it is now security and usability are two exact opposites, and you will, those are always going to make life more difficult for the other. So, if you're trying to do diagnostics on a website, if you're trying to do this, that, or the other thing, there's plenty of times where, Mike has commented about, oh, why the heck does this website have HTTPS? And it's like, well, because they want good Google rankings.
Yeah.
And there's no other reason, because and I'm like, my website, I run it on HTTPS because I think it's cool, but there's absolutely no reason. I don't take payments. I don't have any user login. I make certain that nobody can log into that bloody thing. I turn off all those features. I don't want to interact with people. I want to tell them what I want and nothing else.
Yeah. Lower that attack surface. It makes sense.
Yeah. So, but I mean, it's foolish for me, other than to be able to have better Google rankings. I am negatively impacting the internet, because if somebody's trying to do diagnostics on some portion of why they can't connect to my site, they're losing out on that information. So, yeah, such is life, though.
Yeah. I don't know. I've never had too many problems with the transition to HTTPS. And like Cloudflare makes it easy nowadays. So, you could sign up for the free account and then just say, yeah, throw HTTPS on my site, and it just magics it through the proxy system. You don't even have to like install certificates and stuff like that. Although Let's Encrypt has made that extremely easy nowadays.
Yeah, that's how I run
And then
mine.
who's it? There's a new
so
web
easy.
server that Nick Arellano is talking about. And he's like, I think basically there's just an option inside of there that you say, yeah, just make this secure, and it'll do all of the Let's Encrypt legwork for you. You don't have to do anything. Like it magics it. I can't remember what it's called, but I mean, they're just getting it basically Fisher Price, just easy button.
Oh yeah, and that's really what it should be. A lot of those kind of features, because companies like Squarespace and stuff like that, all it is a bunch of scripts that make it so that it's easy for them to set up and do everything. You press a button and it does it. It's basically the automation that you're doing, but made very, very customized for people. So eventually that's going to turn into being beneficial for more and more people. So I just finally got into my Ubiquity website account, and I'm looking for that beta stuff that we were talking about. Yeah.
So Tommy's talking about on the Ubiquity 60LR, perhaps. I see you have a question mark there. They've got a carrier Ethernet drop feature, right?
Yeah, so there's supposed to be, it's in beta, and it was just announced that for that beta, that you could get the 60LR has carrier Ethernet drop and a couple other nifty looking features. But the big one was that everyone was celebrating was carrier Ethernet drop. And basically, my understanding of that is that if the rate at which the radios are talking, so they're both able to talk up to a gigabit per second, because I believe the 60LR can do 6 gigabit symmetric. But if rain or alignment or some other factor drops that speed down below a certain level that you can now set, the Ethernet port on the radio on both sides will drop temporarily, which will then be useful in some situations. And I think you said something about, I can imagine a couple ideas that I have for it, but do you have any particular experience with that?
Sure. When I was playing the data center game, we have a lot of carriers in there, and I had some particular pain associated with features similar to this, in that most of the carriers, whenever they hand you a connection, what they'll do is they'll whether it's copper or fiber, they'll take connection, and when they see either light or electricity coming off the copper on both sides, well, then they'll enable both ports. Some of them do that, some of them don't. So some of them, if you've got your link up and say site B goes down, well, the interface on site A will also go down, right? So it's basically like an invisible cable for you, right? Like it just looks like it's cable end to end. So if you lose connectivity on one side, the other side pops, and so it gives you a good indication that things are going wrong. And that could be great for, say you have BGP peering between those two hosts. If one side goes down and the other side stays up, the side that's up, right, it by default will communicate every 60 seconds, and you have to have 3 missed keep alives before it tears down the session. So for 3 minutes, you're trying to send traffic out of this interface and it's going nowhere, right? It's like, so your routes in your BGP router are still valid for that destination, and so you're just black holing all the traffic that would match those routes and potentially go that direction. So that can be bad. But if you have both sides drop simultaneously, even if one side just flaps and comes back, by default on really every BGP engine I've ever seen, if an interface flaps that has the peer on it, it will reset the BGP table on the router. So even if it flaps, comes back, it's still going to reset. So it's going to dump all of those. It's going to flush all those routes out of your table and then wait for the session to reestablish so it can relearn routes. And that's great. But I was thinking on this ubiquity, like if the radios are connected and the Ethernet on one side goes down, if the Ethernet on the other side also goes down in this carrier fashion and stays down, how do you connect to it to do diagnostics? Like you can't get to it via your monitoring system, or just to connect in and try and do troubleshooting to see what's going on, stuff like that. So to me, if it was a flap, that would make more sense than just a hard down, I would say. Because also, if you're doing like a dynamic routing protocol across that link and you flap it, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to flush all the routes out and wait for those neighbors to reestablish. So that would be good. If you're doing layer 2 with spanning tree, if you drop it, it's going to, see that interface go down. Well, it's going to use spanning tree to find the alternate path, right? The backup path. And then when it comes back online, obviously no traffic's going to be passing through, so it won't be able to do any MAC learning. So nor will it be able to get STP BPDUs across the link. So nothing will ever reestablish and start moving. So if you just did a quick flap, to me, that would make sense. Of course, if the other side's flapping, you don't want this side to just flap like crazy necessarily. So I guess you could, like in a lot of protocols like BGP, they enable something called dampening. And so it's the idea, if you see a peer flap a bunch, you'll dampen. So you'll actually just kind of ignore him for a while, whatever pre-configured amount of time you want to kind of prevent stuff like that. So I could see a flap being very useful in that scenario. I can see a hard down being very problematic in that scenario, though. Yeah.
It doesn't say. It just says carrier Ethernet drop. My understanding is that carrier Ethernet drop flaps the interface.
All right, so that would be perfect.
And it brings it hard down and then brings it back up after a few seconds once everything's realized, oh hey, everything's down. But I've never used that in my network. I've just either manually swapped things over or if it went down, it just went down because there wasn't a backup for that. So, but it's a nifty idea and feature. I don't know if I've seen dampening features in Mikrotik for the BGP stuff. Have you?
I haven't looked for it in the Mikrotik. I could take a look. I've done it a lot in Cisco, and I know it's in, all the big boys, Juniper, Arista, all the big stuff.
Yeah, I'm not seeing in passive, advanced, max. I guess. I am certain somebody could script something.
You probably could. I was
Yeah.
worried about like if I script something and I don't know, like these weird edge cases, like, oh, I have it to where it'll shut the peer down for a number, that way it'll ignore the messages or whatever. And then it reboots at the same time. And then
Yeah.
it's stuck with the peer down. And then I got to drive my butt up there to fix it. I
Oh,
always
yeah.
think of it because it's like, that's the kind of stuff that will happen to me. It's this
Yep.
one in a million series of events and series of unfortunate events that always seem to kind of spring up. But that was just when we were at a
Oh.
facility where we were guaranteeing SLAs. I've never had problems with
Mhm.
weird stuff like that anywhere else until we were guaranteeing people that things would be up.
Th- Oh yeah. Yeah, well, speaking of weird edge cases, we at the end of May, I got an email from one of my customers who uses our email service. And I was like, "Oh, well, what's going on?" And apparently our email service was doing some pretty major updates that and all of my customers that were using webmail were going to lose their contacts. I guess they'd sent out an email about this at the beginning of April about this, but I'd never heard about any of it, and my boss never mentioned anything. And so, with like 3 days in the end of May left, me and my new minion, we're scrambling to try and figure out how to get a download everyone's contacts, because guarantee you there's going to be some people who are like, where'd all my
Of course,
contacts
yeah.
go? I've lost them. It's the end of the world. And I tried contacting the company and they're like, nope, no way for you to do it en masse with no API or anything like that. It's like, fine. So he's my new guy. He loves auto clickers, and he's like, well, we could just log into each person's account because we have the management interface to do it, and just download it. And we spent a day and a half on it and got all 523 customers. And it was just on his screen, moving, mouse move, click, keyboard shortcuts whenever we could, and anything that could have gone wrong, it did. And as soon as it did, one time we almost took down our whole air control server, which is our management for Ubiquiti, because he didn't even have the application up. It somehow opened it up and then was trying to tell the air control server to, it was like in the reset menu when I'm like, Alt F4, this is done. We're out. We're done here.
Hilarious.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And like all sorts of weird stuff. And that's why auto clickers are the worst. If you're going to build a like management of anything, don't do it through like move the mouse to here, click the button. That's a terrible
I used to
idea.
use some of those at UCS when I worked over there, like in 2003 and 4. We used to use those for various. But it was like you would set it up on this one machine where it was in like right next to yours, so you could watch it while you were working. You could keep looking over at it. Because you can't trust those things. Or your computer would hit like a little lag spike, and it would just
Yeah.
Or the web page would load slow. Anything and everything would go wrong on those.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. Skype popped up once, asking us to log into it. That was another. It broke the whole thing. All right, well, let's go back to reset it. And the best part is that the list of customers would randomize itself every time you refresh the page.
Oh, fun.
Like there was I'm guessing it was related to who had logged in most recently, but it was so we always had to start at the top of the page, otherwise we were gonna miss customers. And so oh man, that was so much. Yeah, it was 11 o'clock at night, and I texted him, and he'd gone home for the day, and I went home too. I'd set it up for remote desktop. I got TeamViewer to work, and TeamViewer is good for remote clickers if you do have to use it. Thank you, TeamViewer. You are awesome. I'm more than happy to have spent all my money last month to buy another year's subscription for you, because it let me go home, and I was able to finish running that bloody thing with a glass of whiskey.
Well, has anybody asked about their contacts yet?
No, not a single one. Not a single one. I was figuring Monday this week was going to be miserable with like 5 or 6 people freaking out, calling. It's like, all right, don't worry. Let me be your hero. Not a single person has called. And so it was probably going to be a day and a half wasted. But yeah, it was good programming. And it was good. He's a new guy. And so it really helped me to kind of get a gauge on where he was and his ability, and let us kind of, I was able to work on other projects, and then when I had a few minutes, I would come over and we would interact about where was he stuck, what was the idea, what's the next step. So that was really good. It was actually kind of fun. We had a lot of fun with that. But I'm not seeing any carrier drop, any Ethernet drop stuff. Maybe somebody out on the internet has done it with Mikrotiks, but I'm not seeing it in the features though.
Yeah, I've
so
scripted some stuff ish before, like watch the log or check an interface on a schedule and see if it's doing that. I mean, but that's a far cry from an embedded feature. So it's sometimes that stuff is nice. Well, the more I think about that, like remote boop and stuff, you could do BFD, like bidirectional forwarding detection, where it's like a rapid protocol between two hosts or two routers to see, if like a path between them goes down or whatever. But a lot of carriers, like if you're BGP pairing with somebody, they're not going to enable BFD to connect with you, right? So you end up in that same kind of boat. This leads me to the next thing. Well, actually, before I move on to that, I was going to say on the remote clicky thing or the screen clicky thing, I've switched to use an AutoIT, so it's less friendly than the stuff.
That's what we were using.
Okay.
AutoIT.
I used to use one where you would kind of like just record the things you did on the screen, whereas AutoIT's more like point and stuff. And so with AutoIT, I've moved more towards like telling it to enable specific windows, and when that one is like check for when active, which is like that's the active window, then do this thing and that thing, or click specifically inside of there.
Oh, it has those features. I've never used AutoIT. It was my guy that's what I was like, because AutoIT is my go-to for scripting and stuff. Like for a bunch of our CPE equipment, it all is the exact same username and password. So I just have 2 keys on my keyboard that I press them, and when I click, it'll auto type the password in. And so and a bunch of other stuff. I have a whole massive auto hotkey thing. Yeah, I was very impressed with AutoIT as in like its feature set. I was thinking like, it should have some sort of, and what we actually ended up doing was waiting for, so as the web page loaded, there would be different colors that would come up on the screen for, okay, the page is loaded. Now there's an orange bar that appears here when it's done. And so we would just look for that orange bar and check pixel colors at various points on his screen. And then he loves JavaScript. I don't understand it, my guy, but he likes it. So he would also go in and edit the JavaScript of the screen and make changes and click buttons through that. And that was a lot more effective for us. If you're doing screen clickers and entering text, at least for Auto Hotkey and AutoIT, it's way better if you don't pretend to be a keyboard for lots of characters. And this is also the same for like, I would assume it's for a lot of different scripting languages, because I ran into the issue with Visual Basic, PowerShell, Auto Hotkey, and AutoIT, is every once in a long while it'll skip a key, or double type a key or something like that. And so if you tell it to just enter this here into this window instead of pretend to press keys, it's way better for the script, and you're going to have a lot more reliability. So, and that removed a lot of bugs for us to have to hunt down and figure out. So just as an FYI, if you're ever having to do that,
when
because eventually you will.
Has amazing feature set in there. So one of the things I would do is when activate, and it tells any window, boom, open up, and you're the active window, and then when wait active. So it's, if it takes a second to load, it'll just sit there and spin until that's the active window. And then if I was going to put in text, I would do clip. Well, I think it's clip or clipboard put. So I would put whatever I want into the clipboard, and then I would just send a paste command or or clip get or
that's
clip
exactly
put.
what we did.
Paste it in there. So it's just there all in one go. Yeah, but I mean, it's anything I could think of that's clever. If I would just search the AutoIT site, there's somebody who's done it, more succinctly in there, that I would just copy the way they did it. Yeah, but it's awesome.
Yeah.
But even then, I know you could do a lot in PowerShell and stuff now. So like with the automation stuff I'm doing with Ansible, you could write a lot of that in PowerShell. But if you're trying to do some real kung fu, I'll still write that in AutoIT, compile it, and then have Ansible push that out and then execute that stuff, do all the crazy stuff via that. So when I was in college, I did VB6, and AutoIT is really just like Visual Basic 6. I mean, it's so close to it, but it was a smooth transition.
I've never seen the code. Yeah, I never saw the code before Friday or Thursday last week, and Friday I was debugging it and figuring out exactly what my guy had done without any of his comments and such. I was just able to read it. It was really, really clear and straightforward. It felt kind of like a mix between like C and Visual Basic. But yeah, I've
we're using the like the SCI TE or whatever, the editor. They have like a
I think so.
It's
maybe
it's a pretty great
yeah. I was very impressed. It was, solid 10 out of 10. If we were to run into the problem again, I would probably go to AutoIT. That or just drop my email provider. Oh, sorry guys, we just don't do email anymore.
Whenever I want to do something, like I want to parse something or do some crazy stuff, I'll just whip out AutoIT and write something in 5 minutes and just have it crank through really fast for me. It's just, it's made me, I don't know. I was gonna say it's made me dumber because it's so easy to use, but I guess not. I mean, it's a convenient tool.
Yeah, does Google make you dumber because it's easy to use and you're able to find information that you want
GPS
quickly?
is definitely making me dumber. Like I don't have to pay attention to where I'm going or how to get there. Yeah, I just let the thing tell me when to turn. Yeah, it's definitely making me dumber. I'll be the first to admit that. All right.
Okay.
Let's transition. So one of the things that came up was and it's not like it's brand new. This stuff kind of is cyclical. It circles back every so often. Somebody was talking about how they are using I'm not sure which, one of the CRS switches kind of towards the edge of their network. So they bring in like their carrier connections, they bring it into a switch, and then they have their border routers plug into that switch. And that's actually how they do all of their network connections, right? So, and I believe Andrew Thrift advocates this configuration method as well. I think he's done it successfully, probably with like some Cisco stuff out at the edge or Juniper. I don't know that, at least when I was talking to him about this stuff, I don't think the Mikrotik switches were kind of in full effect yet. And with their MLAG or MC lag, whatever you want to call it, this might be viable, right? Because normally you don't want to go with just a single switch because that's a single point of failure, but I digress. The idea being, I've got a switch and I've got, say, 2 upstream internet connections that come into it, and I've got, say, maybe 2 border routers that are plugged into that switch, right? So each one peers with one of the upstreams. That way you've got redundancy, right? So you've got redundant upstreams, you've got redundant routers, border routers that are connecting those. Well, what happens one day when I need to upgrade one of the routers on the peers? Well, all I have to do is pre-configure the new device, plug it into that switch, and then whenever I'm ready, I can just shut the interface down to the old router, turn it on to the new router, and it's connected, right? So the switchover is really easy. I don't have to actually touch any cables, right? Like I saw that the interface was up ahead of time, right? So I know layer 1's working. You definitely want to not test layer 1 right there in the window. Make sure that stuff's
You can even test layer 2. Just bring up another interface on the switch and make certain that you can ping across.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah,
there's plenty of different ways
gives you a
you
nice,
can do
easy
that.
transition method. But the problem for me in that scenario is if, say, ISP1, we'll just call it ISP1, whatever. If that peer goes down, border router 1 doesn't know that that interface went down. So if they were directly cabled together, the router would see that interface go down. It would immediately flush those routes from the table, right? Like you would expect. But since they're both connected to the switch doesn't see anything happen to my border router. Well, it just sits there black holing traffic for a minute or two. So that's bad. And so that's where that concept of carrier Ethernet drop would be baller. If you could have it kind of monitor either interface and say, but again, like you said, you could probably custom script some of this stuff. If you see one of the interfaces go down, flap the other interface. And I was doing some transport. So from the data center, I was doing a transport link up to Dallas through FiberLight. And I was pulling connectivity out of there, right? So you can get good internet exchanges. You can get good DIA up there for really inexpensive. I mean, it's very cheap up there. So you're able to pull that stuff in. But here's the rub. If my transport link flapped, and FiberLight would flap, I don't know, every 4.5 months minimum. And every time you'd submit a ticket, they had no idea what happened. It's like, how do you not have tight enough monitoring in your system to see these flaps, right? It was bonkers. Anyway, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of being annoyed at carriers, but that interface would flap. And so their network connection up there, like those routers. So if I was getting DIA from Dallas, their interface wouldn't flap. So all the inbound traffic would be getting black holed to me. I was using route optimizers. So my route optimizers would see that, it would see that network traffic go away and it would route around it. So no big deal on my part, but on theirs, they were black holing it. So what I did is I upgraded to some Nexus 3064s, some Cisco's, right? That's like 48, 10 gig ports. It's a really beefy switch. They're awesome. They're only about $1,000. But they have something called EEM, Embedded Event Manager inside. So it basically allows you to do scripting inside the Cisco switch. So I would watch that transport link, and if it went down, I would kick off an EEM script that would put a message in the log, and then it would shut down the DIA peer interface. And it would I wouldn't even flap it. I would just shut it down. And then whenever my transport link came back up, then I would have another EEM script that would say, it's basically monitoring the log. And when it saw that event happen, it would then just turn that interface back on and everything was great, right? Because if that transport link was down, I didn't need that internet link up for any reason. So it was fine to just keep it down. But in a scenario where you've got a core switch, like at your site, I can definitely see. So if the internet interface went down, how would you do that? So I guess most people, like that router that's going to your switch, like your backbone router, it's probably a single interface and you're doing VLANs on it, right? And so you're routing across those.
Yeah, well,
you'd have to do.
So you'd use the interface coming in from your upstream would be an untagged access port for whatever VLAN. And then you tag it going in, and then, would you even untag it to the router going?
I think you would trunk it because you're going to have some inside interfaces too, right? Like customer facing or more into your network. And so if you're doing router on a stick, you're doing VLANs into that border router. So in that scenario, you definitely wouldn't want the interface to hard go down and stay down, because then you lose management access to it. So what you could do is for every upstream ISP link that's going to go into the switch that you're going to terminate on this border router, you could have a physical interface going to that border router, and then you could flap that physical interface, or whole hog shut that port down and it would be fine. Like it wouldn't. Oh, but what if the converse was true? What if that router went down, like you lost power to that router, border router 1, you would also want to flap the internet link because you want your ISP to flush their tables too. So a hard down, I think, would be a bad idea. Having it go hard down and stay down until the other one came up, because then you would get stuck in this chicken or egg scenario, right? Like if the router went down, the other one would, and then they would, But if you saw one go down, flap the other, I think that would be effective. I think that would work. Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you had some sort of that dampening, as long as your carrier provided that that kind of dampening for you.
Well, like in your switch, if you're scripting that to happen, like say there's not a carrier Ethernet drop functionality in your switch. Say it's a Mikrotik, and you're just faking it. You could have a script in there that would watch ISP1. If it went down, it would flap, Backbone 1's carrier interface, whatever it happened to be. And conversely, you could say if Backbone 1 went down, flap ISP1's interface just really quick. But you're right, you'd have to have some kind of timeout, like you only do that once per minute or something. That way it's not like going crazy if your ISP's like dancing a jig or something like that.
So this is actually making me think, what if instead, does BGP have the ability to say, hey, here's this route that I'm going to announce a route for, whatever my IP address is, this /24. But the gateway is, say I got a /29 from my upstream. The gateway isn't me, it's this other router that only does routing. And then I, as BGP router, just do BGP stuff. Does BGP have that function? I think it does.
Like multi-hop? So not necessarily peer with the next hop, it's on the upstream?
No, not. So the peering router isn't the one that gets the traffic sent to it. So say you have a /29, your upstream provider is .1. Your BGP router would be .2, and then the router that you want the traffic sent to would be .3, if that makes sense. And you say, hey, and you make the announcement of 8.8.0.0/16 is available at whatever IP address .3, but I'm whatever IP address .2. Is that? I think
they do that on like route servers.
Yeah. Because that would be totally. I think you should be able to do that. So
the
then
will say, "Hey, that's
you'd be
available
able to get
from
around
this guy over here, not from me."
Yeah. So it should be. So then it would be actually perfect in this situation, because then it just drops the interface to the route server. So the route server drops it and says, "Oh, I don't have the, your route goes down, but your traffic router doesn't go down," and so you can still get access to everything.
The only problem is that might, like, theoretically that could fix it on your side, but if it's say it's your side that flaps, like your router's the one that flaps, the upstream DIA has no idea that your interface is down over here, right? So they still see the link up.
Yeah, you would have two routers that you'd have to see, and you'd have to do your scripting for. You still have to do the scripting, but this way, then you still have access to your equipment while still dropping the port to the BGP router, and the networking router would have some sort of other connectivity. It's more hardware and probably ridiculous and redundant, but that seems like that might work.
That's a diagram.
Network.
My brain can't go that many chess moves deep.
Yeah, it's fine.
But
yeah, no, that would be the way. I mean, there's that port kind of flapping really definitely would help with the switch. Well, and then also say what happens if your router doesn't have enough 10 gig ports and you're getting a 20 gig circuit. Okay, well, how are you going to connect to your upstream provider? Or if you're running one of the old 1036s like me and you want to get a 10 gig connection from one of your upstreams, I do that too. I have a switch in between me and my upstream, and I just live with the fact of, well, if it goes down, if the BGP session goes down, or if there's some sort of cut and they don't see the interface, I'll spend a couple minutes sending traffic out a dead port, which is unfortunate, but such is life. But that does, using the switch really does help for that and make it so that you can do that transition. And a switch effectively is adding more ports onto a router, especially when you have VLANs, and lets you do that all that wonderfulness. So it works. I think that would be the way to go. Having a switch per upstream. I don't think having a single switch is a good idea. And having multiple upstreams plugged into it, unless you were really confident that switch was never going to break.
Yeah. Or you were never going to do updates on that switch.
Yeah, updates or anything fun with that switch. But I like the idea. It definitely makes things. But for me, I just run a Mikrotik router per upstream, and when I'm going to be transitioning and when I'm going to be doing an update, I just say, hey, I start taking down BGP sessions to and from it, saying, oh, hey, start ignoring this guy. And then eventually there's just no traffic going to and from it, and I can just drop it. Or I can, do its reboot, and no one ever sees any traffic as an issue. And I have 3 upstreams now, so nobody hardly even notices when a router goes down for whatever reason. That slight increase in latency to some services, so which is really wonderful, and it makes it so that I don't have to do as many early morning checks and work, and so it's worth it having multiple carriers, upstream carriers, because then you can sleep in later, more days.
I was just thinking, if you had a switch in place between you and the carrier, you could probably do stuff like mirror a port and sniff the traffic, right? And do that hardware offload so it's not like impacting your border router. Or you could, depending on the switch vendor and make and model therein, you could probably do something like NetFlow collection and export or something like that right there because whenever you enable that on a Mikrotik, that's additional CPU utilization you're going to see on those devices. So if you can offload that to something that's going to do it all on hardware, maybe that could be a benefit as well. Something to that effect.
Well, anything that doesn't have it hardware offloaded is going to have that as a problem. And that's a really good point, because doing it at your upstream may be one of the few places in your network that you can do service of warrant or something like that if you have to. I was actually just asked by somebody last night, like how hard would it be for you to see what I'm doing on my internet? I was like, well, you would be actually really hard, because you're in the middle of freaking nowhere. And I don't have enough batteries to connect up an extra computer. I barely have enough batteries to keep it going for an hour when power goes out there. But that's something to keep in mind, is having that switch in there allows you to do port mirroring, and then you can connect, and you would be able to do your legal duty and service warrants that are provided to you.
It seems nowadays, like, the CALEA compliance, that law enforcement intercept stuff, it seems like they would get a lot less usable info than they would previously, right? So, I mean, like we talked about, most stuff's going to be HTTPS. I guess they would be able to see what services you're going to, but nothing inside of that. And then if you're doing anything encrypted, going through a tunnel, they would just see where the end point of that tunnel is, but, they wouldn't see the to or fro.
The last couple of warrants that we got served was just verification of where customers' name, address, and IP, public and private IP was. They didn't care about anything else.
I think the last one I got was, hey, somebody's harassing somebody else online. This is the IP address we saw it come from. Can you tell us geographically where they are? Like, are they in this apartment complex? Just trying to narrow it down.
Yeah, they already knew who this last guy was, and then the other one was, they yeah, I think they had a suspicion. They're like, "Hey, is this customer on this IP?" And I was like, yeah, they are." And then they had me write that down and give it to them, saying that, yep, that customer was using that IP address at this time. They didn't ever contact it. It's really interesting. Sometimes, like, the cops are like, oh, they'll ask a bunch of questions or whatever. And sometimes it's just like, they ask you like 2 questions, they want it done, and then they never interact with you ever again. You're like, well, hopefully they're happy with whatever I told them.
Did you ask them for anything when they asked you for that information? The last person asked me,
they have to have a warrant.
I need a copy of your warrant that I can keep. I can file away.
Yeah. That we always need to have a warrant. And to be honest, you should, if you're an ISP, you should be looking to have that, because yeah, it covers your ass a lot and makes it so that there isn't, if the cops come with a warrant, you have to service that. If the cops can't come with a warrant, there's no situation wherein you can get in trouble for discrimination against your customers and saying, oh yeah, and for providing that information, that private information, which is becoming more and more legally enforced as years go on, as we have moved forward through the years. So yeah, you don't want to be the one getting sued by a customer for providing information to the cops.
It kind of seems like that's going back and forth, right? Whether does an IP address equal a person? Like I saw a case. I don't remember where it was. I think it was like 2 weeks ago or something like that. I can't remember what country it was in, but it was these people that had like the default. They had like one of those net gears where it was easy to take, like take their SSID and then reverse and figure out what the default key is. And so I think I can't remember what they got slammed for. It might have been child porn or something like that. But they were eventually able to show that they were just using the default stuff. Somebody reversed it, because that takes all of 2 minutes to plug it into a website, and it gives you all of the ones to try. And then you just go down the list, and then one of those is going to work. And then I think they ended up busting like one of their neighbors for like jumping onto his Wi-Fi and using it. But it it was a hellacious legal process for them to show. It's like, dude, we're not doing any. So it's like, it goes back to that whole thing. Is an IP address a person, and where do we draw the line on that stuff?
I always recommend, and I tell all my guys, anything that is related to how the customer gets their internet is private. And so therefore, don't say anything. If they tell you a name, that's the name that you use. If they tell you an address, that's the address that you use. Until you have verified, and we have one person whose job it is to verify customer accounts, and is this person associated with the customer? And otherwise, we won't tell them Wi-Fi passwords, anything. We'll do diagnostics. We'll be like, yep, there looks like there's internet working to you, but you don't put any information. You don't ask them about any of their neighbors, and especially if they have customers or anything like that. It's just we really do try to keep CPNI really locked down. But that probably comes from, I have a background working for dental offices. And that's miserable. HIPAA is horrible. Unless you are getting paid a lot of money, do not do anything that has the words HIPAA involved with it, because it is a pain in the neck and not worth it.
That HIPAA compliance too now, like I see some doctors are doing like texting patients. You can text with your doctor and stuff like that, and that's kind of wild. I'm assuming that stuff must proxy through a service, like it goes to some service and then goes to the doctor, and then and maybe the doctor's got like some private portal that he goes through to access all that stuff. But that would be a freaking nightmare. I can't even begin to imagine how you would lock that stuff down on a cell phone.
Yeah, well, for customer, like notifying them about appointments, that's not private. Or as long as the customer has provided you with a phone number to contact them on, you're able to contact them over that channel. But if they haven't provided you a cell phone number, or they didn't say, yes, you may reach out to me with these specific texts. Like we can reach out to them for account like balance information. We have scheduling notifications and just announcements and, hey, do you want to like come in, and hey, we're doing a deal notifications. And each one of those, if they say no to any one of those three, we have to separate and keep that out, just like normal the email notification stuff. And so that was kind of a nightmare right at the beginning, because somebody just clicked yes for everything for a whole bunch of customers, and it's like, oh my gosh, we're so sorry. But if they give you permission to reach over it, it's fine. But yeah, it's even then, like, we very, very limited of like, this is, we don't say the name, we just say, hey, we're excited to see you for your appointment at whatever time at Dr. Tom's office, and such. And so gets that done and such. And people really do appreciate being reminded about dental appointments.
Oh yeah, I like that stuff.
Oh yeah, and it makes life so much better. And your number of people who actually show up. To the point wherein I kind of want to do it for our installs, is notifying customers, because it's maybe once a month we'll get a customer who didn't realize that we were coming over that day. And so then therefore they weren't there. And so my techs spend a half hour or multiple hours twiddling their thumbs, which is not good. It's not been quite so bad since COVID, because everyone seems to be desperate for internet.
Everybody's already at home.
Yeah, already at home. Yeah, not thinking about going anywhere else. Not traveling to Cancun or whatever. So yeah. Yeah, but back to did you have anything else to say for switches?
Nah. I think I beat that dead horse.
Yeah.
I think I might write a little script for like the CRS stuff, so that if it sees, like you monitor two interfaces, you see one go down, it'll flap the other, and vice versa. Pop up. Yeah. Just for fun, just to see how difficult it is. I don't think it'll be very hard.
Have you done any I2C programming or interaction with stuff?
I've used I've used some components with like Arduinos that communicate over that, but I've never. I know what you're talking about. You're trying to backdoor into those GPENs to auto provision them. I've never attempted to, because it sounds like you have to do some reverse engineering on that sort of stuff. Everything I've done has been very well documented, so I have no idea how to go about that.
Yeah, we are working the very problematic. So for everyone else, Mikrotik has released this product called the GPEN21, which, as far as I can tell, no one has a use for, at least in the United States. It has two Ethernet ports and an SFP port. And I realized that at least one of those Ethernet ports and port had to be bridged together for it to be useful. And so we're using them as copper to Ethernet converters for our fiber to the home project. So we run active Ethernet to the home, the GPEN21, which gives us a web UI, SNMP monitoring. It can be powered over Ethernet and all that stuff. We're doing all that with the GPEN21, which is, for us, we're picking up for like $22 a pop, which is cheaper even than Mikrotik's copper to Ethernet converter. So the one negative for us is we want to do some config on each individual one, and there's no way to do that en masse.
Well, because you need, for one, you need like a distinct IP per one, right? So you can monitor it, and like you said, SNMP poll.
You could turn on DHCP, and then you'd be fine for that. But yeah, no. Identification. I'm running VLANs and doing all sorts of other weird
so you can
stuff.
run VLANs, all these little things.
Oh yeah, tag and untag VLANs. They have some basic bandwidth limiting built into it. I don't use any of that. Um, you have a third Ethernet port, so I use that as a management port. And then they have ACL lists, so I can block any traffic to the GPEN21's MAC address from the customer's side. So, which is like, well, they don't need any of that. It's wonderful. And so it's basic firewalling and such. And as far as I can tell, I've done gigabit symmetric through
With the VLANs
with
enabled and everything.
iPerf.
That's a
Yeah,
baller.
yeah, it's all hardware. Yeah, so it works just fine. In for what I need it to do. But yeah, it would be really wonderful if I could get it to be configurable.
So some method to mass configure the GPEN21. I like the sound of that, man. That sounds like a really cool use case. If only people from Mikrotik listen to this podcast.
Yes, well, I have reached out to you guys. My minion Nastasio has reached out to you. And if you guys wouldn't mind checking out his ticket, he sent you our PowerShell code of what we've of all of our work so far. So please, we beg you, give us some help. Mikrotik, your only hope. So yeah, but it's the cheapest active Ethernet way if you wanted to do that. Now they are not outdoor rated. Guarantee you that. It's pretty easy to brick these little guys, especially if you're sending random code to it with PowerShell. And you do need to update to at least 1.4, 1.14. I can't recall which one it is. I think it's 14. And it's Switch OS Lite. So Switch OS Lite. So Web UI, you get a couple little tabs, and the documentation isn't the world's best. But for $22 to do all this, I'm willing to accept that. So, yeah, it's pretty slick little system. They even fixed. I had an issue months and months ago with I would plug in the SFP port wouldn't auto negotiate with a FiberSource switch, and Mikrotik fixed that, and they also fixed some other stuff with ACL lists not working. So it is actively being developed. It is getting updates. I think the most recent one was this last week. So really cool little device. And Mikrotik's really pushing the GPER and the GPEN solution, which that solution is instead of running fiber, you run Ethernet to like a small
like copper,
neighborhood.
right? Instead of instead of fiber to the home, it's like copper to the home sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And they have a whole line. The 15FR switch, which is an outdoor switch that can be reverse PoE powered. The GPEN21, the GPEN11, which is a kind of regeneration PoE injector into the system. The GPER, which is that 2-port Ethernet PoE in and does PoE out and lets you get up to like, was it 1,000 meters?
It's crazy.
Or
It's like an extender.
Yeah, 1,500 feet. Yeah, 1,500 feet, I think, with for Ethernet. So, which is crazy and really cool. So you can they are putting effort into it. I don't see any use case for it in the United States other than for when you bastardize it and do terrible things to it, like what I'm doing. Yes, I'll do fiber to home with your alternative to fiber to the home equipment.
So the GPEN21s, is there an optional like backup configuration and load configuration?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep, I totally ripped that out and got it. And I have that completely figured out because that's all. A lot of the settings are done in hex, so I reverse engineered all of that. But what I want to do is upload those. I'm really, really lazy. Like at this point, it's upload the config, do the update, and change one ACL rule.
I wonder why the config would be in
but
hex. Why wouldn't they just have it plain text?
The values, I'm guessing it's because they're writing it directly into the chip. because it's like the SNMP community is all in this hex stuff. For ACL rules, it's like value 1, 2, 3 for a port. And for this rule, it's 1, 2, or 3. And then some other stuff is all, let's see, what was the other one? IP address was reversed and in hex. It was the hex integer of the value. So I'm guessing it's just some stuff like that. Is like that's just how the chip interacts directly with the switch, and they aren't going to spend a bunch of time doing the conversions for $22 part. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, fair enough.
So
you could probably AutoIT could do
that. Yes, it could. Dang it, it could. But I'm not going to have it do that because that would be a pain. And because eventually, I'm doing 380 homes right now. And so, yeah, we have 120, 130 of them done right now. So you just sit down for a day and you can pound out 50 or 60 of them pretty easily. But, because the GPEN, they reboot like 10 seconds. There's nothing going on in them. So, they're pretty dumb little guys. They actually don't even have IP config. They don't have a gateway or subnet mask. All they do for when they, for like network connectivity, is they just respond to the MAC address of whatever sent information to their IP, which I think is brilliant. That's so.
That's boilerplate.
It's cool.
Switch OS, like all of their Switch OS does that stuff. Which is kind of it's kind of trippy, but I guess, okay.
It works. And if it lets it be $20 cheaper, it means that third world countries are going to love it that much more.
Now you just need to find a method to blow configs on these things quickly.
Yep. Yeah. Me and first world country problems.
Well, probably you and everybody else are looking to do the exact same thing, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah. If somebody else out there has issues, T. Krogan at lostcreek.tech. Reach out to me. I would love to work with you. And if you know something, I would maybe be willing to pay a bounty, depending on how much you think your time is worth. So, yes, please feel free to reach out to me, and I would thoroughly love it. I will give you credit on my website and proclaim you to the 4 winds. Because I'm going to be doing this for hundreds and hundreds of times. Because so far we've had GPEN21s out in the field for 8 months now, and no failures, no reboots, other than what the customers like unplugged them for.
And even then, you said it's like 10 seconds, right?
Yeah, it's the customers. They'll unplug it and then it comes back up, and I'll tell them to do it. And sometimes NetXMS, it's just perfect timing wherein it misses. It's inside of the window of when it checks, so it doesn't even realize it goes down. Yeah, so which is fun. So yeah, the Mikrotik, I'm thoroughly impressed and love these things. But
I would love a bulk configuration tool for just the regular HAP AC squareds as well, like something that you could just like assembly line, just like have it magic, like that would be pretty amazing. I would pay for that product as well.
Well, they have SSH turned on by default. So that's my next project, is because we're running the HAP AC lights as default routers for customers. And then if they pay for symmetrical gigabit, we bump them up to the AC3s or 4s, whichever ones have the external HAP or whatever the latest HAP is. And that would be super nice because every week I've got 10 different of those to install and set up. But
I had the last apartment complex I did, I had a system set up, but it was very rigged and it was still a decent bit of manual intervention. I would love kind of a more automated way of doing that. That would be pretty awesome. You know, especially if I could get like a high school kid or something to just sit there. Like I could pay him, you know, minimum wage to sit there and blah, 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 blah for a day. You know, I would definitely be on board with that.
Oh yeah, I mean that it makes a lot of sense. And you know, then the high school kid says, "I programmed all these routers. That's so cool." After 30 minutes, and then he's bored out of his brain.
Even if I paid him like above minimum wage just so that I didn't have to do that, or you know, consume one of my engineers' times, it's totally worth it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. How much is your How much is your time worth to you?
Lot.
At least half of that is it. Yeah, way more than minimum wage. So therefore, it is worth it too, especially for dumb job. Although I will say, I love those kind of long-term days when I have to do it because, and it's probably one reason why I fiddled and not gotten the half stuff because, I can just put on a book and listen to the book as I'm pounding through it. And I just finished the Wheel of Time
did
series.
You really?
Yeah. And so, once you get into book 82, it's not that bad.
I remember it being excruciatingly long. And towards the end, I was like, "Why am I still doing this?"
Yeah, the last two books before the final one, I was like, "This is ridiculous. I'm done. Let's just get this over with." And I was reading it at like 2.5 times speed. But the last book was Brandon Sanderson did a very good job in wrapping it up. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I found myself. I haven't taken a consulting gig in about a year now, and I'm.
No, you haven't.
Says the guy who I'm always passing people over to. I signed up a long time ago for this engagement with somebody for this site called GuidePoint, and so it's like it's where people will go to if they're looking for experts in like specific industries. You put in whatever your hourly rate is, and usually you just talk to them. Like it's like an investor or somebody looking to come into a market and they want to sort of talk about this or that. And like they could pay me like $250 an hour. It's like, no, I don't want to talk to you. Sorry. Like, even though it would just be me talking and then they would pay me. It's like, it's like, I don't want to anymore. Like I'm so burned out on that stuff. Like I just want to pretend to be an IT guy moving forward. That's why I'm in sales now. I just pretend to actually, I just want to do my own stuff now.
Yeah, no, I can't blame you.
I'm afraid though that I'm going to start getting, obviously it's already happening. I'm going to start getting dull on some of my skills and, you know, I won't keep up on the newest, latest, greatest cool stuff, but it's becoming, less and less of a burden on my mind anymore. I'm becoming more okay with. You know why? I think it's because I've collected so many like talented people like you that are so keen to do all this stuff, and I could just ask, and you guys will be like, "Hey, take a look at this," and then I can just go look at that and be done. Happy days.
Yeah. One of the things I was actually figuring you would actually contribute. I was asking. Speaking of layer 2 circuits and having them auto drop, I thought it was pretty impressive. Zayo is providing layer 2 transport for me between me and data center down in Denver. And what would happen is the Zayo link would go down when they unplugged their stuff. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. That's really frustrating. I want this to stay up. But whether or not they go down, but because I can talk to some other stuff, but when they whenever it went down, and so I didn't know what that was called. I was asking about that, and apparently that's you get it yourself a transponder OEO, and I have no idea what OEO stands for.
Electric,
but what
electrical optical. So it's like you can think of it as you plug a gray optic in, right, which is like a regular 1310 nanometer single mode optic. Then it's going to convert that to electrical, right? It's going to go into, it's going to digitize it, and then it's going to spit it back out a different color, right, for their DWDM kit. That's really all an OEO does.
Okay. Yeah. And what I was looking for, at least for FiberStore's feature set, was support automatic laser shutdown ALS function. To quote literally their page, you can put that into any accent that you want.
And so OEOs are cool because it's just taking the analog, turning it to bits, and then converting it back to analog, right? It's not a switch, right? There's no way that you can you on that port, you can't connect to it. It's basically invisible, right? It's not like an active Ethernet thing. It's just taking stuff and moving it straight through. You could do it way cheaper if you just got a cheap switch with 2 optical interfaces and plug your gray in one and the, but then it's got a MAC address on it, right? And it's actually switching. It's doing the bridging in between. So it's technically like a semi-intelligent piece of equipment in the path, whereas OEO is really dumb, right? It's just doing that color conversion and spitting it out. So it's kind of, the OEO stuff is way more extensive than getting a cheap switch and doing that. But it's like, do I want my customers to see this in the path? And carriers usually, in those scenarios, they don't. So they go with that kind of kit.
Yeah, they'll throw a fit. Yeah. Well, so yeah, I was looking at that, and that was definitely some really smart people who were talking about that. I appreciated Lee's help in finding what I was looking for, and also the wonderfulness of FiberStore in that they have just a little bit of everything, and have 10 gigs transponder equipment now. So that's gonna be fun. I'll probably be playing with that here soon.
So you went with the FiberStore switches for your fiber to the home stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, we did.
Is that I wish
it's
I had.
not broken on me yet. No. So I had to, in some ways, yes, because their user interface is kind of goofy sometimes, and I appreciate it because it's very Cisco-like, and that's the nice thing about FiberStore stuff, is that it's trying to replicate Cisco in some regards, whereas Mikrotik's like, we're doing our own thing. And so if you have any background with Cisco, Mikrotik is super confusing because they just do it their own way. FiberStore, on the other hand, as long as you have some knowledge of, if I hadn't dealt with Cisco equipment I don't think I could have, just knowing what I knew about Mikrotik, I don't think I could have figured out the FiberStore stuff and some of the SNMP stuff, the syslogging stuff, because certain little bits of the features just aren't documented anywhere. And so you either have to ask them or just randomly start guessing commands and typing them in and pressing tab to try and get. There was one that I just went from A to Z on the keyboard trying to figure out what the next move it up, and I was just like it. So yeah, that level is frustrating for me. Initially I blamed the FiberStore switches for the fiber ports not negotiating between the GPEN21s and the switch, when the GPEN21s would negotiate to Mikrotik stuff, and other Mikrotik stuff would negotiate to the FiberStore stuff. So I was like, well, it seems like the Mikrotik stuff is all working amongst itself and to other stuff. So FiberStore, I blame them. And hard setting fiber ports was a huge pain in the neck on it, but they're cheap. I've not had a single issue with reboots on them. As far as the config, once I set it, it runs. It does exactly what I tell it to do.
Is it pretty power friendly?
No. No, they're they're better than Juniper switches. Something with 48 ports as a Juniper. Let's see, what was these ones? They were $45 a month to run with the dual ports and running DC for us, loaded up entirely. I wanted to say I did the math for. Don't quote me on that. I can, if somebody really cares, I can tell you exactly what the price would be, but I haven't looked at that in a long time. And I'm running DC, not AC, which is what FiberStore quotes you for. So, you know, if I say something different than what FiberStore says, that's because I'm doing DC planned, and negative DC planned. So, just as an FYI. But like per port power consumption, if you were to run CRS 326s versus the FiberStore FS 48 something switch SR 4800 SR, you're like 1.3 times Mikrotik's 1.5 to 1.3 to 1.5 times more power consumption. So power wise, yeah, no, it's not great. And especially like if you go over to like a chassis system, so like what Calix is running, or DOS on Zone chassis where you have line cards that you put in, chassis get really, really efficient with power per port because all the management stuff just doesn't have to be inefficient with that. So you can save yourself a lot of, if you're doing lots and lots and lots of ports, it's more efficient per port, cost wise and power wise in the long run to go with the chassis system. Even more than Mikrotik's after a certain point. I think it was like somewhere in the 120 port range for Mikrotik 326s versus the DOS on Zone chassis. It's something like that. Just because you have redundant stuff like the 326s, each one has to convert your 24 or 48 volt power into 5-volt power for the SFP and for the CPU and all that stuff. And so if you have a single thing doing that, you have less waste there. You have a single processor instead of 30 different ones. So now, admittedly, if your single processor goes down, you're still up a creek, but you know, trade-offs. So. I did a lot of math.
I bet you did. I'm sure you
for
did.
fiber deployment. So,
yeah, I mostly hear people talking about, if they're at a solar site, they really start getting power conscious and stuff like that. But I can't imagine you doing fiber to the home based on solar alone. Now that I've said that, I'm sure there's people that do it, but it seems like you would probably have some kind of standard, mains voltage coming in from a provider in your area.
Yeah, I mean, you could do it, and especially in like really, really rural stuff. But FiberStore is not. Their target audience is enterprise and data center. So that's just not their target audience. Whereas Mikrotik's target audience is people who have power constraints. And then also it's cheaper I don't know if it's cheaper for them to build stuff that uses low power stuff. But they do build with power considerations as a pretty high priority, it seems.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that.
Even the 1072 is pretty sipping on power compared to a lot of other equipment out there.
It seems like, too, if you're using less power, that gives you more flexibility in the environments you can install in, right? So less power consumption generally means less heat produced on the equipment. So you could probably put it in, hotter weather, and it will still maintain operating temperatures, stuff like that. So maybe you get away with a little bit more, too, if you're running lower power.
Less air conditioning. Yep. Less air conditioning. You do need to use more heating, but it's pretty easy to heat and not as easy to cool.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sure you Texans know all about that.
Yeah, we don't really have to heat our stuff very often. It's not. Although I guess people up in the panhandle, those Those weirdos
Yeah.
way up
I
north.
I heard something in this last year about your guys in heating.
I don't want to hear it. That's a distant memory. It's very foggy at this point. What was that? February, March, April,
Yes.
May. June. We're like barely 4 months
Yes.
away from it. So I don't know what you're talking about.
You guys are already freaking
Yeah.
about it.
Snowpocalypse. Lord have mercy. Not looking forward to that for a while.
Yeah. So, any other cool news that you heard
No,
about?
man. I've been keeping my head down here the last few weeks. So I don't know. This is all I had. This is all I got. All I know is the boring stuff that I do day to day, and I don't think most people want to hear about that. So
Do you enjoy talking about the conversations that happen over on Nanog?
I only briefly looked at it, and I was
Yeah.
like, yes, this is not for me. I'll let Mike
Yeah.
get in it. Well, I saw several names I recognized chiming in on that list.
Yeah. To bring people on, it was there was a conversation about what the next speed for FCC, what the FCC should define the broadband speed as, and NANOG is the Network Operators of North America. I think I even got it correct, group. And so largely you're going to have people who care about networking. And so there was quite the long discussion on there, and with heated feelings on all sides, and definitely people on both sides who didn't know what they were talking about. um, so scam artists abound, c'est la vie. But to me, it seems that yes, there's definitely in some regards, there is people who don't have to, who don't know what the expenses and difficulties are in building rural networks. And there was people, and some people were making the argument though that okay, if we up the requirement again now, the people who still don't meet the FCC broadband requirements are now going to even more not be upgraded. That said, nowadays 25 megs really doesn't feel like a lot as much as it used to. And I think that there's definitely some argument for people to say, like, yeah, no, customers will feel higher speeds, and there's definitely a use case for higher speeds than 25 megs. And to whether or not we want to say that 25 megs is a broadband connection. And I think what you really want to do is define, what does broadband mean? What can you do on broadband that you can't do on non-broadband? And so that would probably be where I would start your dividing line, and go from there, because other decisions and arguments really are just going to boil down to, okay, this is what my personal preference is, and this is what I just think and feel. And if you're doing a philosophical argument, you need to have good premises. I may not have a networking degree, but I have a philosophy degree, dang nabbit. And so you need to start from good premises.
I think you need to get on here with somebody who's got a dog in this fight, because I absolutely don't. You need somebody to push against all this one. I think Mike would probably agree with you. So we need somebody that's going to be counter to your. We got to find somebody counter to your point. Throw you guys in the square.
I would make the argument that Mike was probably a bit on the too conservative side. I do think that the FCC. No. Mike actually was saying stuff about how the FCC really does need to enforce how it gives its money, and like when companies don't follow the agreements. And I definitely agree with that too. Like, I've seen companies that get money from the FCC from year to year to year and year, and it's, oh, well, we'll get finished with that upgrade next year. And well, you're getting the money now, so to do it now, you shouldn't be, working your numbers around and fudging things to make it so that you can continue getting your money. And if I've seen that out in the middle of nowhere, Colorado, then it's probably rampant across the industry. And especially with how everybody considers CenturyLink, Spectrum, all the big carriers and such. Like, the ISPs have a bad image in the world for good reason. And it's not entirely because people don't know how internet works.
Yeah, true enough.
So
I think you're 100% right. You have to set a bar somewhere.
mhm.
You definitely need to. Well, because and I've heard this discussion multiple times. But for me, it's like there are still WISPs out there that are, given like 2 meg packages, and their top package is like, 8 megs, and it's like $100, and they're getting away with it, right? And if you don't set some kind of standard to be able to call yourself broadband, well, I mean, that's fine. I guess those guys could still operate. They just wouldn't call themselves broadband anymore. They just scrub their marketing for that, that nomenclature or whatever. But in the end, does that even matter? Say you're in an area where you've only got one WISP. Does it matter if it says broadband on the side of his van or not? I guess it doesn't. If you don't have any other options.
Yeah.
What does that even matter, really?
Yeah. I was, when I first got hired by the company I'm working for, we did not have broadband, but we still were beating a fiber GPON deployment because we actually, our internet actually worked and we had good IT guys. I think in some regards, I mean, your speed of, and I really appreciate how the FCC is requiring companies to follow up and prove that connectivity is working. Because we saw, let's see, there's Form 42 or something like that testing, 477 testing. So if you get CAF 1, 2, or there's another type of funding from the government, from the SDC, they require you to do various testing throughout the year and prove that your customers are getting what the FCC is paying you to deliver. And the amount of hand-wringing, and because it was all a public process of like how the FCC made the requirements. And so you got see from like Verizon, from NTCA, which is National Telecom Providers. It's the small telecom providers group. All these other different companies, even WISP, I think, interjected as well. Like all these people were coming out and saying, oh, well, we don't really like this thing because that's going to be really hard. It's like, FCC is paying you to do this, and they're paying a lot of money. Like, whatever the requirement is, you can stop taking their money to not do it. You're not forced to take FCC money for any of this stuff. There's no reason for you to. And even my boss, like, she ran me around for a little bit. She's like, oh, this is ridiculous. We're having to spend all this money. I'm like, we're getting paid all this money by the government to do this. Cry a river of tears as you
all the way
pay
to the bank?
paycheck. Yeah, as you deposit this paycheck into the bank. Like, who cares? They've been paying you for years to do this. Stop complaining that they're now requiring that you prove to do it. Like, that's basic economics.
It's very human, right? We fear change. We don't like having to break out of our routines. So I totally get it, but I definitely understand your side of it. It's like, we've been paying you to do a job. Would you mind proving it to us? That seems fair to me.
Yeah, I put that into any of my contracts when I'm working with somebody. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to prove that I did it with you. You are going to sign off that I did it before you pay me. I do that because I don't want somebody to say that I didn't do what I told them that I was going to do. how is this? Why is this so difficult for the FCC? So, but whatever. We've spent billions and billions on infrastructure, and I can probably rant about that way beyond anybody else's cares wants to listen to this. So,
hey, bud, we're at about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
You reckon you want to stick a fork in it?
Yeah, I would love to. Any cool projects and such, or ways to reach out to you?
Well, if you I get to go first this time. All right, rock and roll. If you want to get a hold of me, you can find me at greg@gregsoul.com. That's my email address, or I blog very regularly now at gregsoul.com. Although most of my blog posts are about automation, networking automation, things surrounding automation. That's kind of what's first and foremost on my mind. You know what I found? Like, if I'm going to do something at work and it's a process, I'm going to document it, and I'm going to put it up on the internet for everybody else to kind of utilize. I think that's actually probably pretty much how my blog started. I wasn't really sure what to do with it, so I just started making it a brain dump. And I actually use it quite frequently whenever I'm going to do one of my demos, like that I've already made for a customer. I'll go back and watch my own video because I can't remember how I did it. So I make sure I hit all the beats, all the greatest hits there. But having said that, you can also reach me very quickly and easily at our Patreon-only Slack. And it's patreon.com/thebrotherswisp. Get access to the Slack, and you can @ me in there or slide in my DMs. I'm usually pretty good. Like, if you actually ping me directly, getting back pretty quickly. As well as if you have any questions that you pop in there. Man, these guys are so smart. Tommy, you have really blossomed. You have really just come into your own on there. You are probably, I would say you're probably the first guy to answer most of the questions in there. So it's awesome to see. You were kind of timid when you first came in, but man, you're a force now for sure.
Well, I didn't know much of anything when I first came in, so.
Well, very generous with your knowledge, man, and your time, and that's awesome. It's good to meet a Tommy every now and then. Speaking of, if folks want to find you, how do they do that out on the internet?
They can email me at tommy@lostcreek.tech, or T. Krogan, if you want to figure out how to spell my last name.
You don't want to.
No. Actually, my website has a bunch of different ways to get a hold of me. If you want to read my stuff, that's going to be lostcreek.tech. Because there's a Lost Creek out by me, and apparently that's like one of the most popular names for creeks in the United States. So wasn't very creative when me and my friend thought of it.
Gotcha. He says to the guy who made his website just his name. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Krogan was already taken by some bloody bank. It's like, God, screw you guys. So quick question though. Have you ever worked for a company that required you to you post up a lot of code and stuff? Are you required for any licensing and such? Because that's something that I'm going to have to be doing here in a bit. Is code that I've built working for my day job or other people. I'm going to be posting online. It's like, hey, here's how you do this. And nobody's given me any rules, so therefore I get to do whatever I want. But I should probably have rules to follow.
I think it's that's kind of, I know we're right here at the end, but that's something of a gray area. So I did computer science in college, and part of that was we had a copyright class all about that. And what it really boils down to is if you are making code and it's on company time and it's used for the company technically owns the copyright to that software. Now, if you're at home on your own time and you're making software that's still within kind of the realm that your day job sort of falls into, they probably still own the copyright to that code as well. So if it's within the guise of your job, it's still coming. Now, if you go home and you, make software,
develop a video game,
helps the banana industry, be more efficient, they probably don't own your code, right? If it's something completely unrelated, you're probably just fine. But if it's something that theoretically kind of falls within the guise of your day job, but then again, if you get like written permission from your day job to make it open source, you know, publicly post it, stuff like that, then you're totally cool. You know, you're totally clear. And there, you just have to get that. And then also you have to think, would this company, whatever the software is that I'm putting out, is the company I work for, are they going to come after me for this? You know, so it's, you know, it's all stuff that you can kind of weigh. So like the stuff I put out, the company encourages us to do this stuff, believe it or not, you know, because we're an open source company. It's sort of part of the open source philosophies to put your code out there. Also, I'm not allowed to touch anybody's production network. So I'm not like writing playbooks or automations for customers. Now I can write automations, put them up on my GitHub and say, hey man, you can, you know, this is use at your own risk. You can kind of look at this stuff and, you know, copy it and then modify it. But, you know, I can't tell you to put it in production. Okay. And I absolutely won't tell you to put it in production because I don't want that to come down on me. So it's that kind of thing. I think it's sort of a kind of a gray area. It's
so you work for a company that is really supportive of it.
Yeah.
And you've worked for companies that are really supportive of it. And it just depends on what your company says to you about what the rules are. So therefore I get to make my own rules.
So the data center group I worked for, I would have not put any of the code that was even remotely close that they could have problems with because they were those kind of folks. But now it's absolutely no problem. And again, like if you just get them in writing, you say, hey, I'm working on this thing and I just want to open source it so the community can help build this and grow it. So I'm not the only one that has to figure all this stuff out. You know, usually say it like that. Just like, is that cool? Are we good there? You know, if they reply back in an email, you just save a copy of it. You know, you're probably pretty solid there. But also, it usually gets less sticky if you're not making money off the code that you're turning around and selling. So if you are open sourcing it, it's usually not too big a problem either.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you go out and you make $1 million, then your employer may want to like get a taste of that.
I go out and start consulting on this code that I built on company time.
That could be tricky.
Yeah, there's ethical stuff. Yeah, I get you on that one.
Yeah.
Don't be a jerk. You'll probably be
or just get it in writing. You know, just that.
Yeah, get in writing. Don't be a jerk.
Then you're solid. All right, man. I guess let's close it down. If I guess if you guys have any questions, comments, you can fire them over to me, greg@gregsoul.com, or contact us at thebrotherswisp.com. All that stuff goes to the same place. If you want to get a hold of us, you've got the means and the method now. And questions, comments, please keep them coming. Thank you guys, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Tommy. Now let me click stop on everything.
Yeah.
Come over here.
Ideas and some good comedy given. If you missed the show already, don't worry, you're forgiven.